You're listening to The Brown Perspective. This is your host, R.O., and I'm here with my co-host, Eduardo. Repórtate.
Aquí, mi capitán cavernícola, listo para grabar.
Yeah, it's 19 years.
19 years since 9/11. It's crazy. Because I think weren't we 19 years at 19/11? At 9/11? Or close to it?
I was, yeah, I was 19. 19 September 2001. It is true that you do remember. Everyone remembers what they were doing that day.
Mm-hmm.
We're both in college, either procrastinating
Oh, I know what I
or
was doing. I was doing laundry, believe it or not.
really.
And yeah, I was doing laundry in the morning, and then and then at that time I went back to my dorm, and then my girlfriend at the time called me, and she told me, "Oh, you know what? A plane just went into the one of the World Center, one of the World Trade Towers." I was like, "Oh my God!" And she's from New Jersey, so it was close to her. So I was okay. Let me just go over. So I went over, and then we started watching the news, and in my mind I thought, oh, this was just an unfortunate mistake. Somehow, an experienced pilot did not see one of the towers or conditions or what. So I just thought it was an accident. And then as we're watching the coverage, then you see the other plane come into the second tower, and then I just felt my heart sink. I was like, "Oh my God, that was like deliberate. It's an attack." And I think there was a sense of like disbelief that I still feel to today.
Yeah, that moment when you realize that this is no ordinary situation anymore. That
Hmm.
that now you're in the middle. You've been thrust into the middle of something that you know is so severe that everything's gonna change.
Hmm.
Meaning, and by the way, I didn't. You got to watch that second plane hitting the building. You got to watch that live. I didn't
Hmm.
because I was in class at the time. I was taking biology, and the during the class, well, obviously no one was in there. This is 2001. No one had cell phones that
Yeah, no Twitter, no Facebook, nothing.
people had cell phones, but they didn't have cell phones that were plugged in to the matrix the way that they are now. So we got out of class, and I met one of my I met two of my buddies outside of class, and I normally we would go in and eat our breakfast after that class. So we're walking, and I'm hearing all this chatter, all these
Hmm.
people like running up. You know the way that ants communicate with each other, or they come into contact with each other as
In
they're
clusters, yeah, like what's going on? What's
yeah as
happening?
they're going down in their path. That's what it felt like because um, initially I saw like two people. They were talking very like they were having a serious conversation, but you could also see that there was some anxiety there. So I thought, hey, what's going on?
Mm.
I thought it was isolated to them, to that two or three people that they were. But then we kept walking, and then I saw another group of people, and I thought, hey, something happened, something's going on,
Hmm.
and I hadn't vocalized it yet. I started noticing it, and then a few seconds later, like my buddies also noticed it, and they're like, dude, what's going on? So then I think we asked someone like, hey, what's going on? And then they told us, and we rushed to my buddy's dorm room, and then we turned the TV on, or I think the TV was already on because his roommate had it on, and he was glued to the
No.
TV, and then we were watching the two buildings burn, and then we were watching a lot of replays of the planes hitting the buildings. So we're
Hmm.
trying to make sense of what's going on, and I'm also thinking because I didn't see the second plane. At least I didn't see it live. I'm thinking, man,
No.
did someone make a mistake twice? I was like, no, that seems
That doesn't
the
happen.
probability of that happening is like virtually impossible, right? And then but then you still think, okay, the situation seems to be under control. The planes hit the buildings, and then they're burning, but the firefighters are on their way. They're trying to put it out. and
Mm-hmm.
then the fucking buildings start falling.
Yeah, that
And
was fucking
yeah,
crazy,
and
dude.
that was the same moment, that feeling that I had also, where like just that feeling that goes to the pit of your stomach, because you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. So yeah, that was yeah, it's a crazy experience to have gone through that. And yeah, it's been so long now. It doesn't feel
Yeah,
like it's been that long, by the way.
no, it doesn't. And I feel like, as you were sharing your story, like I think we were there watching in disbelief. She was trying to check in with her family in New Jersey, to make sure everybody was okay. I think the phone lines were down, and I think there was just the sense of panic, right? Like, oh my God, what happened? What's going on? Is there going to be more attacks? And then there was news of a third airplane
Yeah.
that was headed to the capital, and we're like, oh my God, what's going on? And where are they going? Who's the next target? And then there was a lot of uncertainty, and I got to DC. Was it 2 3 years after that, after 9/11? And I heard stories. People were still talking about how when they were working in the Capitol, they got the notice to evacuate, and people were just running to go. And I think in DC, what happened too is the Pentagon got a strike too, and that was easy. And I think that when that happened, I was like, oh damn, they're going after military targets.
Hmm.
So like that, oh yeah, this is an act of war. So I felt like for the first time, and since the founding of the country, I think Americans felt what it was to feel to be attacked and to be in war.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of what came afterwards was not pretty.
And
Uh,
actually, I should correct myself because it was, and technically in World War II, Hawaii was attacked, right? So, but that
yeah,
was
but
Hawaii.
no one in
So it
our
was like the main
generation,
line, the
no one
quote
in our
unquote main
generation,
line.
or the one before that really
That's true. Yeah.
had any experience with that. You know, the
Hmm.
the other memory that I have is, um, my family. I think they called me. I don't remember if it was that same day. It must have been, because my family thought I was in New York. This is how like crazy it is to grow up in a Latino family with
We're an
immigrant,
immigrant family too.
yeah, immigrant
Like I
family.
calls from Colombia, like, no, are you in New York? No, I'm north of New
They
York.
thought you were in New York also.
They did, yeah,
Yeah,
because you usually tell, oh, I'm next to New York or close to Boston,
yeah,
but New York is what they associate with the East Coast.
yeah. So my mom and uncles and aunts thought I was in New York, and I did get a
Damn.
call checking in on me, and I said, no, I'm 4 hours away. I'm not there, but thank you for calling in
Hmm.
and letting me know that you have no clue where I am. But at least it showed that they care, that they
Of
cared.
course, yeah.
Yeah. So my parents, yeah, my family, they always thought I was in New York the whole time. They knew
Mm.
está en Nueva York or está por Nueva York, and por Nueva
Hmm.
York meant around, meaning close enough that if New York is attacked, they think I'm in some type of danger, because they probably thought near New York, like 10 minutes away or something like that.
Yeah, you could have marked yourself safe on Facebook.
Yeah, well, Facebook wouldn't launch until another three
2 more
years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got my first, Brown University was one of the few, was one of the first ones to be included in that network, and I remember getting the invite from my roommate at the time. But
Hmm.
anyway, we won't talk about that. So what I mentioned earlier was the unfortunate consequences of 9/11 is we have the war in Afghanistan that's still raging on.
Hmm.
We That was also used as a springboard to justify attacks in Iraq a few years later. It was a
Hmm.
tenuous connection, but it was still linked in one way or another. And then remember all the discrimination and all the hate crimes
Hmm.
against Muslims
Yeah,
immediately
well,
after.
not only Muslims, but like also like Sikh, right? Just because they
Yeah,
wear a
Sikhs.
turban.
Yeah.
And I remember that was almost immediate. Like it was like, okay, who did it? Who, and it took a while to know who it was, but I think the assumption right away, it was like, oh, it was, they were Muslim, and I think almost immediately there was the surge in violence across the country, sadly, and that continues, right?
Yeah, to this day, it just never. It's something that also the politicians have tried to stoke those flames of anti-Muslim, and then this anti-Muslim sentiment, and always trying to associate Muslims with terrorism, and
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why that's so effective is again because of the trauma of 9/11, because
Mm-hmm.
there had been other terrorist attacks before, and they could have been attributed to Muslim groups, like the bombing of the World Trade Center in '93. That
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't nearly as close in terms of devastation as 9/11, but it was still a pretty significant terrorist act. But none of those had really traumatized the nation the way that 9/11 did, and so that's why it's so effective to link Muslims to terrorism. I think mainly because of that because of that incident, and you do see the lingering effects of that, because just think about the mass shootings of far right white nationalist terrorists that they commit against people in this country. Like what's the name of the one that went into the church, the African American church, and killed about 9 people?
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
what's his name? I just had
I don't
it.
know, but yeah, but I think also thinking before 9/11, it was the bombing at the federal building in Oklahoma. I think Timothy
Yeah, Timothy
McVeigh.
McVeigh. But think about the shooting, right? But when that happens, it's always a lone wolf, and they never characterize it as domestic terrorism. Which, I mean, what's the definition of terrorism? You're trying to terrorize a population, and it's very clearly those acts fit within the definition of terrorism. Yet they don't call it that. If it's a Christian, a white Christian, they probably wouldn't call it that if it was a Latino Christian either, because but if it's a Muslim, oh yeah, if it's a Muslim that had a knife, it's like, oh yeah, authorities are looking into whether or not it was an act of terror. They never say lone wolf. Have they ever said lone wolf when it's a if a Muslim shoots up a church or synagogue and kills like either Christians, or what was the most recent one in the last year or two, in the Jewish that killed Jewish people. They
Oh
never.
yeah, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they don't call those. I don't recall if it was Pennsylvania, but yeah, they don't have they ever referred to it as a lone wolf?
No, I think maybe a reporter or two in passing. I think immediately the association is made that this was based on a religion in this in case in most instances, Islam, and so it's a terrorist attack. Um, so yeah, I think it's amazing how as a society we that's the narrative that's been put out there.
Dylan Roof,
There you go.
isn't that his name? Yeah, that's him.
It is.
And remember, they arrested him and then they took him to a drive-through to get food
Yeah,
afterwards.
that's crazy.
If it had been a black guy that shot a church filled with white people, you think they would have arrested? They would have treated him that way?
No,
And
sir.
so anyway, so this is yeah. So these are some. We're still dealing with the repercussions
Mm-hmm.
of 9/11, whether it was good, maybe some good things came of it, but a lot of bad things. Even the firefighters. I feel like I'm being a downer here, but this is just the truth. A lot of the firefighters that went in and they were helping people, and they were rushing up the. I mean, as people were running down, firefighters were rushing up to help contain
Yeah.
the fire. And then the buildings collapse, and then you have that plume of ash mixed in with like all these like chemicals, toxic chemicals, and a lot of people that were in ground zero have ended up with respiratory
Yeah.
illnesses, but yet they didn't. There's nightmare stories about these people being bankrupt and losing everything because of medical bills, and also ultimately their lives. and
Hmm.
then nothing in the way of guaranteeing these people like full coverage for any of their medical care
Hmm.
because again this is
That
capital. Good.
no, go ahead, finish your
Well, I was going to say
sentence.
that that's just the nature of our predatory capitalism that companies that were supposed to provide that care because it wasn't going to be the I mean first of all the government wasn't going to do it and then so the companies they weren't going to do it either because they were just going to find an excuse to say well you guys had pre-existing condition there's no proof that being in ground zero and inhaling those the smoke and the ash had anything to do with it so of course then they'll
Hmm.
deny coverage so that's where the government should have stepped in to to provide this coverage for these people. And that's why whenever they have these anniversaries, it's always bittersweet for me because I see them paying respect to them. And then in the media, they pay lip service to all of this. But the truth is that they didn't really care.
That's very true. And I think it was just last year that Jon Stewart and a bunch of other folks were fighting to have Congress extend
Yeah.
the benefits, right? The benefits that were supposed to expired,
Yep.
and they had the fact that a celebrity and other people had to like basically beg the government to do the right thing.
Yep.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, and it's really unfortunate. And I mean, when you see some of these stories and it's just, it's so infuriating too that
Hmm.
but then they just forget about it and they pretend like they honor something. You know what they do? They do the same thing that they do to Native Americans, especially like in Mexico, where we were at a restaurant once in the city of Durango, and I was there with a few of my cousins. And the restaurant that we went to, it was a nice restaurant. It had like this Spanish style architecture to it, and
Wow.
it had a mural, had a huge mural inside. And the painting seemed similar to the Diego Rivera paintings that you see about indigenous people. So it was
Uh-huh.
like indigenous people working in the fields, and then it was the indigenous woman with the baby in the back, and then the campesino
And then el,
working.
Az- and then El Azteca.
Yeah, yeah, and then I look at that and I told my cousin, I said, Look at just the hypocrisy of the way that they portray Native Americans." Because I said, I bet you if a family that looked like that walked into this restaurant, they would deny them service.
Mm.
So they want to romanticize them,
Yeah.
but only as long as they're no longer around. Like pretend like they existed in the past, and now we're going to
Hmm.
remember them. And that's what they do with these firefighters and all these people that rushed in to help. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna say that we honor your work and your sacrifice, and then we're gonna pretend like we're so grateful, but we're also gonna pretend like you're dead, like you lived in the past and you're no longer around, so we don't have to actually deal with the consequences of actually caring for you now.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is because I think the normal citizen thinks that, okay, they are being taken care of. Like the government is doing, whether it's the New York government or the federal government, did and will continue to do what's necessary to take care of them. But, and then you don't follow the developments and you don't follow how things were actually structured or not. And then obviously, the economy changes, things change, people get busy and people lose track of what may or may not be happening. And yeah, and somehow a lot of it's sad, it's heartbreaking that these folks like veterans and so many others in our community then fall through the cracks and then um, have to live miserable lives because we don't care enough to them to thank them and appreciate their service for us.
Yeah, and no, I agree. And I'm trying to think about the other. Well, I mean, we mentioned the war in Afghanistan still going on. We still have a presence there. That's the thing with interventions that people don't understand. That once they authorize a government to invade another country, they're not getting out. If they don't if there's not an external force pushing them out, they're just gonna stay there.
Mm.
And we see in the presence in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and also think about the number of people also that enlisted to go fight abroad as a result of 9/11.
Yeah, I
And
think
they
we probably would have enlisted if we were not in school, but I know a lot of people our age or younger they enlisted because of that, right? They saw those images, they wanted to fight back for our country, and they enlisted.
You think you would have enlisted if you were if you weren't in school? I don't know, man.
I think so, because I think at that point, because before even going to college, I was looking into the Air Force or Marines. So that was kind of like an option for me. But and and I somehow felt that I appreciated military. I don't know. There's something about the uniform, about the prestige that comes with being in the army. That I was like, oh, that would be kind of cool. But then eventually, I got sidetracked and got what I want. Um, but I also wanted to on what happened with 9/11. I think the crazy thing about is who actually committed the fact and the fact nationals, and and I know that that's still something that it's not discussed.
You broke off there a bit. Can you repeat that? What's not discussed?
Oh, the fact that it was Saudi nationals, the ones who were
Yeah,
who ones who executed the attack.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe they lived in Afghanistan, but they were Saudi, and they're an ally of the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why also they didn't look more deeper than they had to, and they Osama bin Laden is not even from Afghanistan. He's from Saudi Arabia, and like
Hmm.
as you mentioned, and all the other ones too. And but yet we ended up invading Afghanistan, and sure enough, I mean, there's so much that we can get into about the occupation of Afghanistan, about the takeover of the poppy fields, and then the strategically why that is a place where the United States would have probably ended up in anyway. 9/11 was probably just a good excuse to get in there because
Hmm.
just strategically where it sits very close to China, and then strategically in that area, the U.S. Would have wanted a presence there anyway, as part of like the global um, imperial like chessboard.
Yeah, and
That
because
can
Russia lost there, so the U.S. probably saw an opportunity. Okay, the Russians couldn't do it. We can do it. Let's go in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, at some point we can probably get a little bit more into there's definitely a lot of good journalists and reporters out there that have done great work on in terms of like uncovering some of the hidden agenda that is not exposed to the American public as to why the United States would want to be in Afghanistan. But let's just wrap up the conversation here with 9/11. So, uh, man, that yeah. Any other any other thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think that it's something that you never forget, and I know that was the hashtag that that was used over the celebration or yesterday celebrating. But I think what came out of 9/11, I think, is the sense of unity. Even if it was very briefly lived, there was a sense of unity, the sense of compassion, the sense of service too, because I know since then a lot of people have tried to do something that honors, that provides service to the community. So I think it's definitely one of those life changing events that change our society, that shaped who we are today, and that yeah, that will be interesting to see how it continues to define our legacy, our lives, as we continue to celebrate milestones like the 19th anniversary.
Yeah, one final thought on unity because you brought it up. It really is a
Okay.
double-edged sword though because think about what unity the unity that you're talking about. You're probably thinking about it from the point of view of in communities, people helping each other and looking after each other and feeling a sense of closeness to each other.
Hmm.
To the extent that right, let's we already talked about the discrimination against Muslims. So when we talk about unity, it's probably talking about maybe there was some unity between whites and African Americans because they couldn't, African Americans had nothing to do with this. So maybe there was some unity there with also with Latinos, because normally we're not looked at as terrorists or committing terrorist acts. So maybe yeah, at the expense of Muslims, there was some unity between the other groups. But then think of all the power that that unity gave the government, because it also meant that we were united in supporting our government invading other countries, and we were also united in giving them the ability to pass something like the Patriot Act, which took away a lot of Americans' rights. So
Yeah, because you give the government, one of the main functions of government is to protect you, and A, they failed at that, and B, once you're attacked, you want to get protected and make sure that doesn't happen again, or that something worse happens. So I think it's a natural response that people just like, okay, we need to protect ourselves, and we need to give our leaders the the discretion and the power they need to keep us safe, even if that includes doing war and some other crazy things. But you're right.
I mean, that's a
It
dangerous.
was
Yeah, that's just. But that's dangerous because look, we still have the Patriot Act. It wasn't given to them with the condition that says you have these limited powers for so long, and then they're going to expire, and they're not going to be. You're not going to be able to keep renewing them, and then continue
no,
this indefinitely the way they have. So so that's the problem sometimes of uniting the masses, because if you're uniting them against a common cause, and then that unity is used to exploit and give the government overwhelming powers to do these things, then ultimately that can come back and hurt people.
that's true. Very true. And I think the other unity that I want to mention is the fact that I think, people across the world love the United States and New York in particular. So I also remember that, across the world, there were tributes and also felt like the world uh, wept with the U.S. and with the residents, with the documented and undocumented people who died. And I know there were people from across the world that passed away in 9/11. But that was the other thing, that human love, that compassion for complete strangers was something that I do remember also happened, similar to what happened recently with the George Floyd murder
Hmm.
response. That I felt that there was a global response to what people saw in that video. But yeah, I remember that. I also feel like the world gave a hug to the U.S. and particularly New York because of what happened on 9/11.
Man, I hope all those people that you're mentioning also wept for all the people that we killed in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I think some people have, yeah. I think when you go across fast forward a year or so, when I went to study abroad in Spain, and there was the authorization to go into war. People argued with me. People wanted to fight me, and for me, as a Latino in Spain who had grown up in the United States, I was like, you know what? I don't agree with the war. Like, I don't agree with it, but like, I'm an American, so like, it was this weird thing about, like, I don't support the war, but hey, like, I also know that I benefit and I lived and I do owe and love this country. So, and but people were there. Like, I remember the protests in Spain and Barcelona and across the world trying to um, to protest and stop the war authorization. So I also remember that feeling of, oh, people just see me as an American and they don't like Americans right now. And I think naturally you also want to defend your country. So I remember experiencing that too.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, you get into a tricky situation when that country that you're saying you're defending is an imperial power that has the capability to decimate the world 10 times over, because you don't know how measured they're going to be in their response. So once you give them the authorization to go out there and kill and invade, man, there's no telling what that, because it's not like you have other powers that can hold back the U.S., that can restrain, and the U.S. can do whatever they want because it's a superpower. And when they get a blank check from the people to go out there and invade, then, I mean, yeah, you see the consequences of that. So yeah, it's a tricky situation. Anyhow,
It sure is.
you want to wrap us up?
So as always, thank you for listening to us. If you want to follow us on Twitter, follow us at Brown Perspective. We also YouTube, of course. Hopefully you're following our channel and on Insta because we certainly want to be Insta famous. So here's some of the posts that we've made so far, but we hope that you stay connected with us and let us know what you think about the topics that we're discussing here at the Brown Perspective.
Nos vemos.